Round 4 of Norway chess was relatively quiet. 4 of the games were drawn. Magnus Carlsen couldn't shake Topalov. Simen Agderstein continues to impress and played very solidly against Kramnik. Aronian and Svidler, well, that was a bit tedious. And Caruana against Giri, that was more interesting, but neither player had any serious advantage, and finally it petered out to a draw. That leaves us without one decisive game between Sergey Karjakin and Alexander Grischuk. So we joined the game after 15 moves. It was a Grunfeld. You can see that quite clearly from the pawn structure. White has this majority of pawns in the centre, but black has a queenside pawn majority. You can see that here against 2, and active play with his pieces on the queenside. Okay, it's a balanced position. Karjakin played the bishop here. Understandable, this bishop cutting across the board is a strong piece. Grischuk exchanged off. Now, really, Karjakin ought to recapture with the queen. Instead, he played pawn takes, which looks very tempting. You know, now white has this clump of pawns in the centre of the board. The pawn threatens the knight. The problem is there is a huge tactical drawback to this move. He had completely overlooked the strength of this pawn move. If the queen moves away, then that's a very nasty discovered check. If the queen blocks, then bishop here, and again, after the queen moves, there'll be a discovered check through to the king. Basically, white has to take this pawn, but then comes this check. So you can see queen and rook now threaten white's rook on c3, and Karjakin had to take this, but now black wins the exchange. Of course, that cannot be taken because of this pin, so the king has to come up the board. Grischuk exchanged queens, and he has simply won the exchange. So he has rook against knight. Well, it's not so simple because of this very nice clump of pawns in the middle of the board. However, there is no doubt that black stands better in this position. So Karjakin switched the rook across, defending his bishop here and attacking the pawn. And, well, chess is a difficult game. You know, it's clear that Grischuk is better here. But it's at this moment already that he probably makes a mistake. He chose the plan of advancing his queenside pawns. Now, this looks tempting. He has this pawn majority here, so it looks logical to do that. But there are drawbacks to this advance, as we'll see in a second. It would have been probably better to play more modestly with b6. Now these pawns support each other, and crucially that pawn covers this square. And then to switch the rook across to the open c-file as quickly as possible. Okay, let's see what happened in the game. So the pawn advanced. Now, Karjakin brought his knight back. Now this was good strategy. And then put the knight here. Now you can see that the rook, it's not exactly trapped, but it's not doing a lot in this corner of the board. And rooks like to work together, and they're split. That's a problem. So Grischuk continued with this plan of advancing his queenside pawns. Now, good move from Karjakin. The problem is that these pawns aren't going to go very far when they only have the support of these pieces. In fact, white's pieces do a good job here, and with this very active rook, white is doing well. And now we can see how important it would have been for that pawn to control the c5 square. Of course, black is reluctant to trade off rooks as he would like to, because now that gives white this very strong pawn duo, and of course this rook is still cut out of play. So Grischuk kept advancing, but white's rook is now too active. Okay, I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail over these next moves, but I think it's quite clear that white now has the initiative. And yeah, it's very difficult for black to hold his position together. So Grischuk sought counterplay. Now he's ditched his bishop, but at least he gets the knight, and now the rooks are sort of working together. But now white has two pawns. Well, okay, black wins one of them back straight away, but yeah. Now you can see that white has this very dangerous mass of pawns in the middle of the board. And, well, as is usual for Grischuk, he found himself short of time, and this is a very difficult position to defend. Let me dash to the time control, and then the dust clears, and we can see what's going on. But basically you can see that, yeah, these pawns are very dangerous. And okay, now we get to the time control. So that's move 40. Both players got to the time control. They can take stock of the position, and Karjakin found an excellent move here. King here, attacking the rook. But the point is, it makes room for the bishop to enter the game, and in combination with the king and this pawn here, this is too much for black. So Grischuk remained active with his rook. The bishop came out, and this is really nasty. Let's have a look and see what happens if black were to take this pawn. Then the king comes up, and then the rook takes here. You can see how the king is covered beautifully by the bishop, and also the king protects this pawn. So it's this very compact mass, and really black can't touch these pieces with his rooks. They're not doing a lot, and sooner or later the bishop is going to cover this pawn, and it's going to roll through. Okay, let's go back. So rook c1 was played. Check. Of course, the king doesn't want to walk this way into the line of the bishop. That would be disastrous. The king came across, and now check and king up. So what happens if black threatens to take this bishop? Well, then the king steps in, of course, and there's no defense to checkmate. So the king has to step up the board, and Karjakin just whipped a pawn off. In fact, there's not a lot that black can do in this position. Let's just see what happens if, instead of this, again, black goes to try to win this bishop. Here's a nice variation. First of all, we force black's king back, and now we close in for the kill again. So mate is threatened. King steps aside, and bishop here. Excellent move, covering this square, so mate is threatened again. So the king steps across. Now here's a very neat maneuver. Check. The king comes here, and now rook here. The idea is that we're now threatening to play bishop e6 and rook b8. So the king steps across in order to cover with the rook, but anyway, bishop here. It's really neat the way white's rook switches from one side to the other, and now there's no decent defense to rook b8. You have to play a rook here, but of course white just takes. So, very dangerous mating net. Grischuk tried rook here, forcing the pawn forward. Instead, if white tried the same idea, this doesn't work now, because black checks, the bishop covers, looks very dangerous, mate is still threatened, but rook takes pawn saves black because the rook can cover here. Okay, back we go. So the pawn advanced. Now, well, Karjakin just was very cool, just advanced his pawn, just kind of fixing these. There's actually no rush here. There's no real defence that black has. And now he went in. So, similar idea. Rook mate is threatened. The king came across. Check. Now, it's very easy, actually. You can see the king is covered beautifully by these pawns, and it's just going to clean up here. As also, of course, white wants to push the d-pawn, still a terrible threat. King takes, threatening mate again, so black has to push the king away. And now, of course, it's possible to take this pawn, but this is a more accurate move. And here Grischuk actually resigned. The point is that it's not really very good for black to take, because then there's a check and white wins the rook with this skewer. And, well, apart from that, there's no real defence. For example, if the rook comes across to prevent d6, let's give a check. King here, and then rook e7, threatening mate. So black simply can't defend against the threats of mate and hold up these pawns at the same time. So once again we have a very uneven performance from Alexander Grischuk. Two wins and 2 losses from him. You never know where it's going to go with him. But, well, after a very strange incident where Karjakin overlooked this tactic, well, he played very well indeed. So, at the end of round 4, the scores are Fabiano Caruana still in the lead with 3 points, Kramnik in sole second place with 2.5, then 5 players on 2 points, Carlsen, Agdestein, Aronian, Karjakin and Grischuk. So we're not even at the halfway stage, and all still to play for.